There are actually 3 separate CAD incidents created, 1 police, 1 fire, and 1 EMS. That is perfectly normal. While we have consolidated call taking and 1 set of people takes all the incoming calls, the incidents are created either simultaneously or sequentially, depending on how the call flows, for each of the public safety response agencies, New Orleans Police, New Orleans Fire, and New Orleans EMS. So our first call was received at 11:54:41. And I've got the seconds there because in our world, seconds matter. There's a very big difference between 11:55 and 1 second and 11:55 and 59 seconds. So that's why we normally work. Our CAD system actually carries it out to milliseconds, but I didn't think that would be of any interest. So we got the first call. And I'm going to turn around and read it because my eyes are old, so I apologize. But at 11:55 and 35 seconds, the first incident was created in CAD, an NOPD incident for a domestic disturbance code 2. So that's a lights and siren call, as you guys know. When our personnel, emergency communications specialist, had sufficient information to put into the system. It included the initial assessment as a verbal domestic disturbance, and the notes say that at that point the caller had advised our person her kid's father is at location and called her on the phone. She heard her kids screaming. Now, in retrospect, we look at that and, oh my God, we got to get somebody there right now this minute. But that's all we knew. If you had called my house and dispatched police when my kids were younger, anytime they were screaming, I would have had an officer stationed at my house all the time. That is not meant to make light of anything, but simply to illustrate that only what's there is what we knew. That's all we can react to. By 11:57:21, our emergency communications specialist continued going through the protocol with the caller, got the suspect information, name, description, etc. An additional information was provided. There are children present, ages 3, 5, and 7, and the complainant state subject has tapped her phone, been threatening them, and also threatened to burn the house down. Now, I apologize, this is not great English. Our call takers try to get the information in as quickly as possible. They don't worry about punctuation, correct spelling, things like that. At 11:59:27, so what, roughly 2 minutes and a few seconds later, our police dispatcher handling the 7th District toned out and broadcast this incident over the air. The reason that she toned it out and broadcast it is because there were no units in a clear status that she could simply dispatch someone to the call. Therefore, policy and procedure is for a code 2 call, if there are no units available, we hit the tone so everybody hears it in the field and then broadcast the incident out so that everyone on another call knows what's holding. And 30 seconds later, 11:59:56, the district rank in the 7th District was notified directly by the dispatcher of the holding call. Domestic disturbance, code 2, etc. At 8 minutes after midnight, almost 9 minutes, we got another 911 call from a neighbor, probably the one whose Ring camera video is being sent around, saying that there was a house on fire. And it's color-coded. Blue is police, red is fire, green is EMS as we go through and when you get the final one. The NOFD incident was created less than a minute later, in fact 30 seconds later, which is well within NFPA standards for responding to fire 911 calls. In fact, a minute is allocated for that first creation process. So we're running ahead of the curve at that point. At 9:38, or 9 minutes and 38 seconds after midnight, so do the math, 16 seconds after the call was created, NOFD units were dispatched. Again, under NFPA standards, we have 2 minutes from a receipt of call to dispatch of units. So we are again beating what the national standards and requirements are and getting the units rolling. Now, when we dispatch NOFD, for those of you not familiar, we have what's called station alerting. So as soon as it's hit in CAD to dispatch them, lights and tones go off in the district stations. A PA system opens up in the firehouse, and our dispatcher's voice is heard verbalizing and dispatching them to the incident, which is repeated twice for the firefighters as they're donning turnout gear, running to the trucks, getting on them, and getting rolling. Under national standards, I believe it's 4 minutes that they have to get to the call, but don't quote me on that one. You can look that up. We got another call reporting the fire at 12:11. And we got another call reporting the fire at 12:13 with additional information of children trapped in the home. At 14 minutes after midnight and 13 seconds, the first NOFD unit arrived on the scene. So again, that's how many minutes from dispatch to arrival? 9 to 14? Yeah, 5 minutes. They're within the standard, if I recall. At 15 minutes after midnight, NOPD units cleared and were dispatched on the call. They cleared from whatever they were on, and our dispatcher immediately assigned them and sent them to the call. Notice that fire is already on scene when that happened. At 16 minutes after midnight, the NOFD units requested EMS, and the call was what we call cloned, or the actual CAD incident was simply sent to EMS as an EMS incident for our EMS dispatchers to dispatch field units. At 18 minutes and 11 seconds, EMS units were dispatched. At 19:22, 2 children were removed from the home or rescued from the home, pulled from the home by NOFD. At 20 minutes after midnight, the first NOPD unit arrived on the scene. At 29 minutes, the first EMS unit arrived on the scene and had patient contact a minute and a half later, and immediately broadcast that they were working 2 codes or doing CPR on both children. At 48 minutes after midnight, NOPD had been working on their investigation, and we did the first citywide broadcast of the wanted suspect, the ex-husband, the perpetrator, the man who killed these children. The fire was placed under control at 40 minutes after midnight. That does not mean the fire was out. That means that NOFD had it under control and it was no longer spreading or getting bigger. At 57 minutes after midnight, or almost 1 a.m., EMS transported the 2 children to the hospital while still working an active code on both of them. I put this in here for your benefit. Within our computer-assisted dispatch system, when we enter an address, it shows up with any other calls we've had in the last 3 years at that address. 3 of these calls you're seeing now, because I generated it this morning, were the calls pertaining to the incident that we're worried about. There was one other domestic violence incident in July. That's the reason for the time lag between when my dispatcher received the CAD incident and when she broadcast it, because she was first looking at that previous incident to see what it was, saw that it was another domestic violence, and she beeped it out immediately and broadcast it for any 7 district units available. That's all the formal presentation I have for you. Well, now I'll take any questions that you guys have that I can answer.
Let's start on this side.
Okay. Megan?
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, just looking at that timeline, I guess, can you kind of, what goes through a call taker's mind and the stress and everything involved in taking a call, dispatching, all of that? Especially for a case like this where, eventually we found out it was 3 children involved.
Exactly. Our call takers take each call as it comes. As part of their training, we work on coping strategies and doing their jobs and compartmentalizing what's coming in and suppressing your own emotions to not get involved. If 2 people on the call are both upset and not being rational, then nothing gets done. Normally, the caller is calling us on the worst day of their life. You know, people don't call 911 to say, hey, it's a great day, how's everything going? So all of our calls are not good things for the most part. This is a particularly bad thing. And as I said, we've got mental health engaged for our personnel after the fact in dealing with knowing now what happened in the trauma. But the important part is that our first responders are just like the responders in the field. They do their jobs, they do what needs to be done, they handle it with empathy, but without getting wrapped up in the emotion. And somebody has to guide the call and get the information. An important point to bring up, there have been comments made about the protocols and all the questions and does it delay response? It doesn't. Priority dispatch, who we use for our question and answer protocols, has been around for a while. It's an internationally recognized system, and it's computerized question and answer, and as you go through and ask the questions, it branches and determines really what's going on. But it also recognizes a critical incident. So as soon as we get enough information to know who to send and where to send them, we get what's called a send point in priority dispatch. And at that point, the call goes to CAD and goes to the dispatcher. So there is no delay while she was asking the additional questions on what's the suspect description, tell me more about what's happening, and got the further information. It had already gone to the dispatcher. In an ideal world, we would have enough field units to be able to assign someone and send them to that call immediately. You guys are well aware we don't live in an ideal world now. So we broadcast it so that everyone knew it was holding. We will be following up with NOPD, with NOFD, trying to see if there's anything we could do different. If there's any other way we could get more information, anything else we could provide, any way else we could know what we know now.
Good.
So are you saying that, on the line you had on the screen, no units available? If there were to be an available NOPD unit, the response would have been faster to this fire?
That seems logical. There were no units available, therefore no one could be assigned to go to it. Now, if there had been a unit available that was at the other side of the 7th district, who knows? That's all pure speculation. But our policy is if there's a unit free for a code 2 call, they get assigned it. And that is NOPD's policy as well. If there are no units free, we hit the tone, we broadcast it, we then notify the platoon rank, which was 720.
And I'm sorry, you may have already said this, but at the time when the initial call went out, was NOFD also notified at the exact same time?
No, NOFD was not notified until we received a call that there was a fire. All we had.
The mother was saying he was threatening to
Well,
over in the house?
the mother said he was threatening. Current policies and procedures are not to dispatch fire because somebody says someone's going to set a fire. Now, whether, in retrospect, who knows? That's why I say we're going to work with the NOPD domestic violence people, the mayor's task force, et cetera, to determine if there's some way that we can forecast or know that should have been done. As of now, if we sent fire units to every time somebody said there's going to be a fire, at that point you're rolling fire trucks, code 2, endangering citizens, et cetera, et cetera. So someone has to deal with that, and I'll work with Superintendent Roman Nelson at the fire department to determine if they want to make any changes to our protocols. But again, in retrospect, it's easy to know, yeah, would have been great to send fire as soon as they said he threatened to set a fire. But unfortunately, that's in retrospect. Nothing that we knew at that time pushed it past that point.
And you'll see in the timeline specifically where it says this part of the call, it said he's going crazy, he's threatening, and at that point the incident, and then later he says he's setting fire to the house. So
Right, he has threatened to. In no time did the original caller say he has set the house on fire, or if anything had been expressed as a certainty there was a fire,
Right.
yeah, there would have been an NOFD incident created and dispatched. But he says he's going to. People say a lot of things. Sorry.
And I know you kind of touched on this, but knowing that there were previous incidents.
A single incident is all we knew about.
Okay. Well, knowing that
Just the one.
there was a previous incident, why was dispatch not immediately reaching out to EMS in this situation, considering the time it took for EMS to get there?
Again, until we know there's a reason for EMS, we can't send EMS just on a hunch or a hint. We have to know there's a need for them. And based upon what was known at the time, there was nothing to tell us we needed to send EMS.
Were any policies deviated from?
I have my training compliance team looking into it. It's obviously a very detailed incident. The initial pass-through is that all of our personnel followed standards, followed protocols, and did what they were supposed to do. We are not going to take that initial pass as gospel. We're going to dive down deeper and make sure that is indeed the case. But there is nothing glaring, nothing has jumped out as we doing anything outside of policy or wrong.
Following this, are there any policies you feel need to be changed?
Right now, I'm not aware of any. I don't know, but that's why I said we'll follow up with the Mayor's Domestic Violence Working Group. We'll talk to the city council members. We'll talk to fire and police and see if we can figure out what could have been done differently, if anything. You know, ultimately, it's a tragedy perpetrated by an individual. And even putting police officers on every corner in the city, you can't stop every crime. So we'll see what we can do, but unfortunately, we don't have Minority Report at this point.
And last question, if there was a unit in the area for NMPD, do you think the outcome could have been different in this situation?
That's pure speculation. I don't know. I don't want to inflame anything or speculate on that.
Okay. Good afternoon. You mentioned city council right now. Dr. Regno is making a presentation regarding domestic violence and homicides. I was just there, and Councilmember Moreno had a very heavy-hearted opening statement talking about domestic violence and, of course, this incident that we've all been
Was
reporting
watching that
on.
before I came over here.
So you heard her comments about domestic violence and how there needs to be a little bit more urgency in responding to these. Do you have any response to what she was saying?
All I can say is to look at the facts of the timeline. We broadcast it within 4 minutes of the call hitting us and broadcast it out for a police response. That's all I can do.
Knowing, and we kind of touched on this when Aubrey asked, but knowing this emphasis that City Council wants to put on domestic violence, is there anything that OPCD can do? I know there's a protocol system, and that system's been in place for so long, but do you think that domestic violence calls maybe need to be changed in the sense of how they're taken in and how they're responded to within that protocol?
Again, given that less than 4 minutes after the call started, it was in CAD and being broadcast as a domestic violence, initial send point is where is it, what's happening, and information for responder safety. That's when it went out. That's when it was first sent to the dispatcher. The dispatcher at that point is looking at it and looked at the previous history and saw there was a previous domestic violence at that location. About the same time as when the update was coming in with the threat and broadcast it out. So to answer your question, we don't know what we don't know. All we can do is try to explore it, and that's the purpose of the Domestic Violence Committee. We've been working with Dr. Marino, we've been working with EMS, we've been working with NOPD Special Victims Unit, and anything that we can do to help provide better response for it, we're more than happy to do so. But the real important aspect is that the protocols are there for a reason, so that we can accurately determine what's going on, and we map that to the incident types of the agencies to determine default priority and response. That all worked in this case just fine. What else we can do to more prioritize domestic violence, I don't know. It already was a code 2. It was already broadcast immediately. So to answer your question, I don't know if there's anything else we can do. If we discover it, we'll do it.
Just for clarity, can you just explain what a code 2 is? And maybe
I'm
what's
sorry.
the difference?
I think, so there are basically 3 priorities for calls. Code 0 is what would be called an APR response for a police officer to call back to take the report over the phone. Excuse me. Code 1 is in generally referred to as no lights, no siren, drive at the speed limit, et cetera, it's a pass type call or a lower priority call. Code 2 is lights and siren priority call.
So essentially code 2 is like the most urgent.
Correct.
Okay. So, I can't speak for everyone, but I do want to say, I think we have empathy for the dispatchers. I mean, it's a difficult job. I think you really don't know what it's like until you're in that chair. So I just do want to say
Thank you. My team will appreciate that.
Yes, yes, and, you know, I understand the trauma that comes with it.
And I'll even say, if anyone wants to see what it's like, we'll be happy to do a sit-along. You will not be able to record, you will not be able to take pictures, you know, et cetera. But we will allow you to come in and experience it if anybody is interested, or if any of our city council members or anybody else in city government wants to come and see what it's like. We'll get you a headset, we'll sit you down with a call taker, you'll sign an NDA for anything that happens to come up while you're there, and we'll let you experience it, because it's a very tough job. I couldn't do it, okay? I'm not built that way, and I understand that. But my people, the heroes under the headset who spend their days doing this, are ultimately among the hardest working public safety people in the city of New Orleans. You know, there's a reason we got the state to pass the law that said, acknowledging they are truly first responders, like the field personnel for police, fire, and EMS. Didn't mean to short circuit your question, but.
No, you're fine. I guess my question is, do you think, hindsight is 20/20, but do you think anywhere a ball was dropped, and when I say a ball is dropped, maybe there was a lack of resources, or do you all look at it right now and see it as just a tragedy that couldn't have been avoided?
I can only speak to us, to OPCD. I'm the interim executive director for the communication district. So taking the calls and handling the dispatch is our responsibility. As of right now, this minute, based on that initial first look and listening to the calls, et cetera, I don't believe we dropped any balls. I believe all of our personnel did what they were supposed to, the way they were trained, in an empathetic but not emotionally involved manner, and figured out what was happening, where it was, who needed to go, and got everything done to make that happen.
And then during the call, the caller, she says that, and you know, I don't have the call right here, but you all say initially she said he's threatening, but apparently she didn't finish the sentence. And then later the dispatcher asked if anyone was in danger. And I think
Correct.
that may have confused some people. Do you think the dispatcher should have already known that there was a possibility of danger by her saying that her kids are yelling?
Wasn't the dispatcher who asked the question, it was the call taker.
That's what-
It's our terminology, and it's important because we have the emergency communication specialists who get the calls in and talk to the callers and enter it into the computer-assisted dispatch system. And we have the dispatchers who actually take it when it gets to them, dispatch the field units, track them, et cetera, et cetera. So the call taker followed the protocol and got the initial information that she could out of the caller, who was understandably very upset at her job receiving these threats over the phone, and dive deeper to get the further information as she hit that in the protocol long after the call had been created and sent. We hit the first send point, it went to dispatch. Dispatcher was already looking to see that history and determined, I need to get this out now. In the meantime, that next update came in, which delayed to look at that and see if, it could have been somebody saying, oh, never mind, it's okay. My mom was there or whatever. It wasn't, but it could have been, so we need to make sure the dispatcher has all the information before she starts sending units. So we had that slight delay due to that. None of it delayed the fact that we knew it was a code 2 domestic violence call and needed to get people going.
And then, so, I guess explain the process. It's the call taker, and then are the dispatchers also here? How does?
Yes, the dispatchers are sitting in a different place of the room, and again, if you want a visual,
Yeah.
we'll take you in after this is over with, and it might clear it up for you. But the dispatchers are over here, getting the calls, typing the information into the computer-assisted dispatch system, answering the questions, et cetera. They hit the send point. It goes over within CAD to the dispatcher for the appropriate discipline, police, fire, EMS, or all of them. And the constant updating occurs as long as the call taker is still on the phone or other calls come in and other people are supplying information, which also goes into the same CAD incident.
Since you were saying there's a difference between the call taker and the dispatcher, so first, the call taker is speaking to the person.
The caller,
reporting the
right.
emergency,
Correct?
and then do they transfer it to?
No, the call taker keeps speaking on the phone.
Okay.
That's why asking the questions furthermore and giving the pre-arrival instructions doesn't delay any response
Okay.
caused by us. That is one person or multiple people talking to multiple callers about the incident. The information goes through the computer-assisted dispatch system to the dispatcher, who knows the call taker is still on the phone updating as they get more information, but they are looking at it on their screen and handling their units on their system. So that way, unlike the film 911 where she got the call and then jumped out and ran in the car and drove, et cetera, that's not how it works.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead, in the back.
Thanks for the transparency with this conference, and also just, thanks to the first responders that worked with really hard.
That's what I intend to do going forward is, anything happens, you guys will be the second or third to know.
Cool. I have a question kind of about general trends around domestic calls. I look at NOPD's public-facing calls for service dashboard, and I noticed in May and June there was a pretty large spike in domestic-related calls. I was wondering if you can speak to the trend, what we're seeing now, any possible drivers for this recent uptick?
I don't know. We don't get into that here. That's for their crime analysis to do, and that's in NOPD's silo. I'm sure people can go on at unlimited as to why or what. We simply deal with the fact that it's happening and get the resources there.
Okay, and this might also be out of your wheelhouse, but I am curious to know whether Fire has told you about what started the fire.
No, we haven't heard anything about that.
Anybody else want to go again?
I got one. I guess what is the overall message you might want to say to the rest of the city, specifically those that might suffer from domestic violence or a domestic violence
Well,
situation?
I'll echo what Dr. Avegno has said repeatedly, what the general message is. If you're in an abusive relationship, call for help. Get help. There's help out there. There's all kind of help. Don't wait till it turns violent. It's not going to get any better. Studies have shown people don't stop being abusers until outside intervention occurs, and sometimes not even then. So there are all kind of resources out there. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call. And please call for help. If you're in an abusive relationship, if you know someone in an abusive relationship, help them get out. We're all here, and every one of us in public safety would vastly prefer to help people get out and move on with successful lives rather than dealing with the ultimate consequence like we ran into this time.
Audrey, did you have another question?
Is there a national standard that you'll follow when it comes to
For?
people coming in and the amount of time it takes to reach out for additional assistance?
The only national standard with regard to call processing time is on the fire side. That's NFPA publishes standards for that. They're actually part of PIAL, the insurance industry, and it's driven by the insurance industry. And there's also science behind fire in that if it's X minutes before you get water on a fire, it will double in size. So there's a whole lot of science in that world. And as a result, there are standards as to how long to take the call, how long to dispatch the units, how long before the units arrive on scene. That's how NOFD determines where firehouses are. And when the firehouses were down after storms, et cetera, where they were going to stage units at, it didn't have a house to go to in order to keep that response time within the parameters necessary. The only national standard in our world is the call answer time. How long the call rings, the incoming emergency call rings before we have someone answer it. And that is 90% of incoming 911 calls in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and 95% in 20 seconds. We're not meeting that on a regular basis now due to staffing issues. We don't have enough bodies, pure and simple. We tried running mandatory overtime, We looked really well stat-wise for the first half of the year because of that, but mandatory overtime also burns out my people, and I start losing them, which exacerbates the problem. So we have very reluctantly canceled that, and we're answering about 80% within that first 10 seconds now.
We're gonna wrap
And
it
we're
up.
continuing to work to fill the slots. I've got open recs. If anybody is interested in working at 911 and taking calls or becoming a dispatcher, please reach out to us. We'll be running another class right after the first of the year.